Want to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit
Sure,
about you and what
sure.
you do and stuff? Okay,
Perfect.
cool.
So I'm with Plug and Play. I think traditionally we've been pretty well known for the accelerator programs that we run around the world. More recently, I would say around last year, we did a bit of a rebranding towards what we call an innovation platform. And we like to keep it broad for a number of reasons because we do so many different things. At our core, we still are venture capital investors making around 200 to 250 investments per year, strictly early stage. And then also, we still have our accelerator programs running across our 36 different locations. But I think a couple things to note are that we are non-equity and we're also stage agnostic, right? So this is incentivizing more later stage companies and more experienced founders to come through our 3-month business development program so we can help them scale their business. Now, at our very core, our last pillar is what we call the corporate innovation side of things, where we partner with around 400 corporations out of just Silicon Valley, really looking to accelerate their innovation activities through startup introductions. So whether if it's the investment side of things, running proof of concepts or pilot projects, the ultimate goal is if we can have a couple implementations and see these startup companies take their product and bring it to market, we would say that's a huge win.
Nice. So when I first heard of Plug and Play and I first went to Plug and Play, this is ages and ages ago, I just thought you guys were like Office Space, right? You were Office Space with a couple of additional perks.
Yeah.
And that's all I thought you were. So, I mean, when I first started, that seemed all it was. I mean, I'd say to them, like, how do you guys differentiate yourselves from WeWork or Regus or any of these other things? And there was this, oh, here, we do all this. We assist startups in all these different ways. Do you still do all that?
Yeah, we do. So I think that's still the very core. We don't say it's part of our 3 main pillars of business, but we still offer office space. That's really ultimately how Plug and Play began. It was actually on 165 University Avenue. It's a little ways off from Stanford. Actually, there was a little rug store, Medallion Rug, and then our
Yeah,
CEO,
those
Saeed
guys.
Hamidi, yeah, exactly. He used to rent out office space, and luckily for him, some of the first few people that moved in were Google, Logitech, and PayPal. Right? And I
Wow.
think that building is still there. I think it's called Lucky Building. You can type in Lucky Building into Google with no additional terms, and that building actually comes out. Right?
Wow.
So
That is a
that's
big building if all those
actually
guys
how Plug
went
and
there.
Play started. Right? And so the early investments that our CEO made was from bouncing ideas off of the folks who were actually rich enough to buy these rugs back then, who happened to be VCs. Right? So
Nice.
they would say, hey, you should look into this company. They're doing pretty well. Maybe you put in $10,000. And luckily for him, that $10,000 or so, how much he put into PayPal after they were acquired by eBay, that was his first big return, that $1.5 billion exit. Right.
Nice.
Right.
Nice. Nice.
And
Well,
our current
so
building, yeah.
no, that building, it still has a rug company in the bottom floor, right? This is
Yeah.
upstairs from there. Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's what I thought. It's just so unassuming. It's just like it just looks like a regular rug store, but then upstairs is where all the brain trust is happening, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And so I
Okay.
think Google moved in when there were 3 employees, moved out when there were 50, right? PayPal came along. They negotiated the deal because I think back then rent was also still pretty expensive in Palo Alto. So they had 2 years of rent upfront, first year in cash, second year in equity. And that's really how all of Plug and Play started, right?
Wow.
So to
Nice.
this
I had
day,
no idea.
yeah, exactly. We still offer office space to some of the folks that want to be plugged into the ecosystem, whether if it's the startup company or even just corporations. Ultimately, it's offering a soft landing into Silicon Valley.
Mhm.
Sometimes this doesn't make sense being in the corner of, for example, San Jose, where you can just be in a building filled with startup companies. And the goal is if we can provide amenities you typically find in any Fortune 500 company, like an office space, internet front desk, data center. I don't think anyone uses those anymore,
Yeah.
actually. Um, then everyone can focus on their goal, like whether if it's to raise more money or refine your product. You meet all the right people in the right places.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's what differentiates your model from WeWork too, right? Because WeWork is just space, and sure they put you in with other startups, but is there a lot of interaction? Is there a lot of additional assistance from you guys? I don't think that they do that sort of thing. It's more here's some space, and you guys provide a lot more assistance. That's right.
I think we
Right.
we are maybe number one on the networking side. Right? We did Last year, I think we had 790 events, and each of these
Wow.
events are really just to push more interactions.
Hmm.
And and circling back, I think WeWork, they actually wanted to adopt more of this innovation model. I think right now it's maybe not the top of the list for them.
Well, of course, I mean, I'm going to ask you eventually, like, what's this doing to your business model? Because people in the same room, right? Or getting people in the same space. And this is obviously, this COVID thing has obviously upset your business model just a little bit.
Yeah, I think businesses where we focus a lot on these interactions, we've had to do a really quick pivot towards digital. And so we're
Mm.
trying to really determine how can we continue showing this value that we've continuously done before virtually, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of these virtual meetings, it's been taking place, and really virtual has been pretty good for Plug and Play because we have so many locations, and corporations no longer have to fly in. Startup companies no longer have to make that trip over to Plug and Play. We can just make these ad hoc introductions and still retain that value that we show to our ecosystem.
Yeah. Have you thought about rolling out a virtual version of it, or maybe you already have that? Like you have a virtual seat at
So that
Plug and
would
Play.
almost that would almost be like a dating app.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's like Tinder for startups, right? It's
exactly.
just
It's like a this technology match. No, yes, yes, no. Yeah.
That's right. So you have to have a real good picture of your logo or something up there. Uh, I forget where I was going with this. Oh yeah, so you guys provide a lot more support than somebody like WeWork or any of these other spaces do. But I mean, that comes at a high cost, or is it around the same price? Or I mean, what does the startup have to give up when they come to you guys as opposed to going to another place like that?
So in terms of just the real estate aspect, there's really nothing they have to give up. We don't take equity from startup companies unless we actually invest. And so to
Right.
be part of the community, if you want to work in the building, there's really nothing for them to lose apart from the rent price. Right.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, is it how much and how much is it? Is it comparable to something like WeWork or?
I think it's pretty comparable. We do office space based on seats. Now, I can't give an exact number. I don't work too much on the buildings operations side of things. But if you are interested, for those who are watching afterwards, go check out the website. You can apply
Right.
to be part of the building.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to say, like, how do you compare with
Mhm.
other services of this type, right? Because we have, like, on the one hand, you have things like Hacker Dojo, which is just like, hey, you get to space in a like a long space with some internet connectivity, and at the other end, you've got more full service, VC accelerator type stuff. So where do you guys fit in this continuum?
So I would say right in the middle, right? And so these startup companies in the building, I would say, are part of our network. Obviously, those are the ones that are really trying to scale up the business because they want to meet some of these people more organically in the building. Or you want to be inside Silicon Valley.
Mm,
For the startup companies that we engage with now, more often than not, they'll have their own building. Sometimes they will send people over, maybe one person from business development, someone more sales oriented to meet some of these clients out in Silicon Valley. But usually the startup companies are pretty far along when we work with them. Yeah.
So you keep saying inside Silicon Valley, so it makes me think that a lot of your people are actually not based here or not originally based here. Are you getting a lot of sort of corporate outposts from other companies or other places in the world, or what's your composition of the people who are there?
So that's a great question. Our building composition was 450 startup companies and about 30 to 40 corporations. So the corporates usually look to Silicon Valley as an outpost. They will have maybe one or two scouts working out of the building because sometimes it just doesn't make sense for them to pay an absorbing cost for office space. And if you can meet all of these startup companies and go to all of these events, which are free, then you're probably going to be doing your job a lot easier, right?
Hmm.
And to answer your second half of the question, we do see a lot of corporations entering Silicon Valley because of the idea of just innovation being here, right? And
Yeah.
it's not wrong. I think the majority of the capital is still flowing out of Sand Hill Road, right? Just one street, all of this money is flowing out of it. But there are definitely a lot more hubs They are setting up. I think this is one of my colleagues just clicked on the link. You could remove him if you'd like.
Well, is he joining our call?
I suppose.
Did you want to bring him in, or I can drop
We can, if you'd like. We can. So Johannes.
Oh, he's gone.
All right. All right.
The perils of Zoom, right? I mean.
Yeah. I think he was double checked my calendar, my work calendar, and decided to hop in and see what was going on.
I love it. So here's. Did you finish answering, or I have another question for you?
Oh, I was going to mention there's just so many more hubs being built around in the United States. I think a lot of people are realizing human capital is so expensive in Silicon Valley, right? And the housing prices are ridiculous. And now, especially now that COVID has shown that so many companies can operate perfectly efficient, like perfectly efficiency-wise from home, a lot of people are just going to move out of Silicon Valley.
Oh yeah. And have you heard? I mean, Facebook is going to be reducing everybody's salaries too. Like if you move to another area where it's cheaper to live, they're going to reduce your salary. So, I mean, I haven't heard anybody say anything like that. I have a colleague, when I used to work with Yahoo, I had a colleague move up to Portland and they kept his salary exactly the same, which was great for him because he was getting paid a Silicon Valley salary in Portland. But of course, I don't think anybody's going to continue to do that. So
exactly.
it's definitely, this whole thing has shown that a lot of tech companies were way more ready to deal with something like this than they thought, I'm sure.
So now I'm really curious, what is the Silicon Valley tax, right? In terms of the salary, right? So if I were to move, right, if that person from Facebook is to move, what percentage of the salary is gone, right? Like how much do they actually take into account, cost of living, like the housing? I'm just very curious to see that.
It depends on where they move to, right? I mean, I think he moved to Portland, and Portland's cost of living at the time was much lower, right? So it was like a 30% bump or something like that. And now, if you move to Portland or Seattle, it's about the same. But if you move to someplace like Austin, then it's like maybe 30%. So if you were making 200 grand here, you'd probably only be making 160 or something like that there. So I think that's probably what they're going to do. They're going to look at all the different various numbers and say, oh, if you're moving to Kansas City, that's a much smaller fraction of what you'd be getting in Silicon Valley, because there is a premium. There is a huge premium on living and working here, but totally worth it, right?
It's interesting you mentioned Austin, right? Because no income tax, I think that might actually be a better deal.
Yeah, exactly. When you start factoring that in. So you're saying that this COVID thing hasn't really affected you guys that much? I thought most of your business model was
a lot of these meetings, right? A lot of these matchmaking sessions. So it's definitely affected us. We've really quickly pivoted towards virtual, right? Thank goodness we were able to just start setting up these webinars, RSI chats, putting out these lists of startup companies and provide them to our network to really push engagement during these times.
Right. So let's say I'm a startup and I'm looking for some help. Do you go through the same kind of a process a VC would, where you have to vet everybody who comes in, or are you a little more open about who comes in?
Definitely a lot more open. So can you go back and maybe clarify, like, what does it mean by come in? Like into the building, or is it within our network?
I mean, if someone wants to come into your, well, what are the different options? First of all, like, I'm just thinking, like I said, my initial concept of Plug and Play is, okay, I'm running a startup, 1 person, 2 person startup, whatever. We're all at home and we need some help, right? We need some help. Where do we go? Right? We could go to a place like WeWork, but that's all that's going to give us is office space and maybe a little bit of connectivity with other people, or Hacker Dojo, same thing. But with you guys, I mean, I have to, if I'm going to decide if I'm going to go with you, then like what kind of intake process is there? I mean, do I have to jump through a lot of hoops? Do I have to be making money? Like what stage is my startup perfect choice for you guys?
So in terms of our accelerator program, my best recommendation is once you have a product, right? Once there's an MVP, because traditionally, regardless if the startup company is earlier or later, they just need to be able to interact with the corporations on the platform. We're a little bit different from the traditional accelerator where it's not so much the hand holding, right? I think there's a lot of amazing accelerators out there like 500 Startups and Y Combinator. They do an amazing job where they connect you to the right mentor network, really help define, your business plan, the model, like whether if this is even the right market. For us, we're really trying to help scale that business over 3 months. Right?
Mhm.
And
So
regardless is,
go ahead.
okay, I was
that
going to say,
go ahead.
all right. So regardless if they're part of the accelerator batch or not, whether if they're just in the building where we have a lot of workshops held on a regular basis to help refine pitch, for example, meet other startup founders to understand like what were the issues that they faced. A lot of it is just community building.
Right. So if I was a really early startup, like I just have an idea, right? I don't have any co-founders. I just have a concept in my head and I want to explore that. So would that be a fit for your, just like I can get a seat at this office, or are you not interested in anybody who's at that level?
I think they can still move into the office. We have different teams when it comes to evaluating startup companies. We have a 70-person venture team upstairs in Silicon Valley that their only job is to just source as many companies as possible, right, and make investments, obviously. And then we also have a separate team that's called Startup Accelerator Program, Startup Camp that traditionally partners with universities like the Engineering Club or the Entrepreneurial Club and makes a lot smaller investments in much earlier stage companies. And so that would be the team that you would interface with much more if you're much earlier stage.
Right. So you can conceivably come in with just an idea and then be hooked up with a co-founder, so who can help.
So I don't know if we would connect you to a co-founder. You could meet your co-founder at Plug and Play at one of the networking events.
Right.
I would maybe recommend having a company name.
Right. If anybody's heard of me, I don't exist yet.
Yeah.
But okay, so there is a tier for somebody who can just come in and says, "Hey, I need a seat, and I'm building out my concept, but I haven't really done anything. I haven't really gotten anywhere yet." You still accept people like that because they pay the rent, right? So they cover that cost.
Exactly. Yeah.
But those people, if they've eventually built an MVP, then they can look at you and go, "Hey, here's my MVP. Can you consider me for some other program?"
Yeah, and application for our accelerator program is pretty straightforward. You just go online, submit the details, and then somebody contacts you to hop on a call.
Do you show preference to people who are already in at Plug and Play?
So I wouldn't say there's any preference. Our accelerator filtration process is heavily based off of the corporations. And so, for example, if you're looking at the mobility space, if we have, let's say, 2,500 applications every 6 months, and then including some of the sourcing efforts, we will then work with the corporations to narrow down that list and really see which ones the corporates want in the platform. So in a way, we're utilizing this big network of corporations that have all of these technical folks to see which startup companies would gain the most traction before we even accept that.
So does that mean you have a list of technologies and areas that these corporates are looking for, and then you just happen to match? Or so if I was say I was an employee and I'm unhappy and I wanted to go start up my own startup, would I be able to come to you guys and say, "Hey, what's in demand right now? What's hot?" And then I could sort of pivot whatever I'm doing to meet your demand?
You could ask us what's hot, what's happening in Silicon Valley. I don't think we could give you very specific technology focuses. Obviously, I think most of the trends in different areas are pretty well known, the direction a lot of these different industries are going towards. Well, a lot of the batches are going to be based off of what the corporates are looking for, yes. Right? And so that's really how Plug and Play keeps up with all of these different trends, right? Like if you just look at mobility, for example, 2 years ago, everyone was talking about L4, L5 autonomy, right? And last year, people were like, okay, hold on one second. Maybe that's not going to happen anytime soon. Let's pour a lot more money into shared mobility and electrification.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So there's constantly pivoting going on, and you just have to hit it at the right moment.
Yeah,
So
I think
what's hot right now? Is it AI? Is it still AI? What's hot right? Like, what is the number one thing that's hot right now that if I were to start up a startup, that would be the space to be in?
space to be in depends how much funding you can secure, right? Because a lot of these hotter startup companies, like in electrification, right? Like if you want to start an EV car company, go ahead, right?
Yeah,
But that's very capital intensive.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So it sounds like the ideal company is something that's not very capital intensive, and that you can show some what am I looking
Some
for?
return.
At least some revenues or some eyeballs right away. Is that
Yeah.
the kind of thing that is
So a
what you
lot
think
of
is
Silicon Valley, they make the investments based on like a lot more software investments because hardware technologies, it takes a very long time for return, and everyone has LPs. They need to say like 3 to 5 years down the road, can you get us some return? Right.
right? So that's why hardware is a tougher row to hoe
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you're looking at those things. So I had a discussion with somebody just the other day, and he came up with 5 areas that he says that there needs to be focus on. I thought I'd throw these 5 areas at you, and you can tell me
Okay.
whether or not which one of these you think is the hottest. And I don't know if I'm going to remember them all now, but the first one was in restaurant technology. So do you think there's something cooking in the
Pun intended.
restaurant space? I didn't even mean that. In the so you know how Kalninek's cloud kitchens, right? His next thing after Uber. So is there something interesting in the restaurant space that
Oof,
people might be interested in?
I'm not
Not in sit
familiar.
down restaurants. I'm talking about like cloud kitchens where there's there's a kitchen somewhere and somebody's building a back end, and then you have Grubhub and Uber Eats doing the delivery. So there's no actual restaurant. It's just a
Mhm.
kitchen, and it's like a ghost restaurant. I forget what they call them, ghost kitchen or something
Like
like
this,
that.
no brick and mortar store.
Yeah, exactly. And not a food truck either. So,
Mhm.
you think there's anything in that space?
I think there could be a lot of potential. We haven't looked into the restaurant space in terms of innovation. We don't have a lot of. I don't think we have any restaurant corporate partners that have looked into that. But I think that's based off of like if you see like the success from like Wayfair, Warby Parker, or it's just strictly digital sales. I think there's a lot of overhead costs that you decrease, right?
Right.
And I
So,
think
what
in the
about
beginning, if you look at even just Uber, it's about can you woo your investors in the beginning to show them like, hey, this is our long-term goal. Eventually, we'll be revenue positive, right? But
yeah?
we need some money now, right? And this is, I think, that's a really good play for him.
Well, so, and Uber is really a software play, isn't it? It's not even a hardware play. There's like no hardware involved. So,
Well, I think Uber is moving so they want to invest so much into autonomous driving because their biggest cost is the driver itself,
yeah,
right? So if they can remove that out of the equation, a lot of all of the profit is going to go into Uber besides like the maintenance cost of the vehicles,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely it. So, what about medical? Do you have things in the medical space that do you have medical folks? Is that something you focus on, or?
Yeah, so we do have a health program. We work very closely with, I think, Bill Melinda Gates Foundation. There's a number of different partners that are just escaping me right now. Quite a few of the big platforms as well. But we do look, I think, a lot into remote patient monitoring and then also diagnostics. Roche Diagnostics, sorry about that. That was a big partner out of Europe. Almost forgot the name. Yeah.
Wow.
And obviously, I
Very
think
cool.
during the current times, a lot of folks were looking into contact tracing, anything related for COVID um, technologies.
Hmm. And what about logistics? Anything in
So
that space?
definitely a lot into logistics. We have a huge supply chain and logistics platform. I think there's around 45 corporations just working in that space.
Mhm.
So a lot of asset tracking, monitoring, a lot of robotics on that side of things as well. We recently partnered with Walmart to run their entire innovation platform in Northwest Arkansas. And so they're now
Nice.
one of our biggest partners in the supply chain space.
Very cool. Very cool. And they're very interested in finding innovation in the supply chain and improving that process. I mean, that's basically their whole from day one. That's always been their focus, right?
Exactly.
Um, What about hospitality? They're taking a big hit due to
Oof.
COVID. Have you seen anybody doing any innovation in that space?
So I think travel hospitality as an industry has definitely taken the biggest hit from
Mhm.
COVID. We do have a pretty big team on the travel side of things at Plug and Play, and we've seen a lot of the airlines have cut a lot of their funding on a lot of big projects. And in terms of hospitality, hopefully, I believe it's going to rebound a little bit faster than everyone's expecting. It's not to the extent of the financial crisis. The hotels are all reopening, and apparently packed in some areas.
Hmm.
Right. So
That's exactly right. Yeah,
yeah,
one of my clients. I have clients in the hospitality space, and they're surprised at how quickly things are rebounding. Because I think people are just desperate to get out. They're
yeah,
desperate to get out. They're desperate to see people. They're desperate to leave home. I guess people don't like their home so much. They want to
yeah,
stay in
yeah.
there for 90 days. It gets a little crazy. Yeah. So I forget what the last one was. I think that was all for. There was another one in the. Yeah, I think it was mostly logistics, but it sounds like from what we just talked about, it sounds like logistics is a huge space right now, and there's still lots of growth that could be
Definitely.
explored.
Yeah, yeah. I
Right?
think it's also because logistics is almost like a horizontal
Yeah.
industry. Like a lot of companies can look into the space, and the reason why so many companies want to invest in this space is because like at Plug and Play, we say saving you money, decreasing overhead costs might almost be better than making more money,
Oh
right? And
yeah.
so that
Yeah. That's
logistics
always
play
the
is
first thing,
definitely,
right?
oh yeah, yeah,
The first thing that you do if you want to show a rapid increase in profitability, you cut, right? So you have to figure out how to improve that process, and that's something that happens even in lean times, right? In fact, it's more likely that people are going to jump on something like that in lean times
yeah,
because they don't want to take this. Oh, should I create this risky new product, which I don't know if anybody's going to buy, or can I just like shave a few percentage off my bottom line and get the profitability? So
yeah.
yeah, cool. So what was also going to ask you? So where do you see things going for Plug and Play? I mean, what's the so where do you see things 5-10 years into the future? Because I mean, right now, looking at the way things are with COVID and all that other stuff, a lot of things that have to do with face-to-face interactions
Mhm.
are going through a huge, not just challenge, but they also have to go through a huge pivot. I mean, where do you see them in 5 to 10 years? Where do you see yourself, or not yourself, but where do you see the company in 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, definitely. So I think obviously digital is going to be ingrained in a lot of companies in their future. We do have our own innovation software that we're still slowly starting to roll out to more people outside of our network called Playbook. And so I think ultimately we were just joking about the Tinder for corporates and startups. I think that might actually be the future for Plug and Play. Right?
Right.
Can we start selling in a way or like offering subscriptions to our innovation platform software and then allowing these corporates and startups to just instantly match with each other for those meetings?
Yeah.
Right. But I
So
think
something you're saying is the matching is going to be the piece that's key, as less so the other services you're providing, but the matching.
so. I think that just stays at our very core. I think for us, we still will offer the services where we will dedicate innovation managers to corporates that are a little bit less further along on their innovation journey, so we can help them through the POC process. And the goal for us, I think, 5-10 years down the road is to continue being embedded in many corporations' innovation strategies, right? Because if you look at just the corporate and startup typical relationship, it's very transactional, right? You get the POC done, pilot project, and that's it. And so really now it's how can we take that POC or that pilot project and help cultivate a lot more cultural change within an organization. And ideally, we want Plug and Play to be at the center of that within a lot of companies.
Right. So let's switch to the corporate innovator side for a second. So a lot of my listeners are also corporate innovators. They're under a lot of challenge, right? In good times, they have funding, they know what they're doing, there's lots of products in the pipeline. But in bad times, they're like, oh my God, what are we going to do? They're going to kill the department. How are we going to get out of this? So how would they leverage you guys to be able to continue innovating when times are tight?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So the goal for us is we don't look to replace any existing functions. Ultimately, it's to augment whatever's there. And so if you're looking to, if your KPI is to find a certain amount of companies that fit your technology, and we can be that extension, not only in Silicon Valley, but help you source across Europe, Asia, what have you. And then that makes it a lot easier for you to focus on other aspects of your job, right? And so for a lot of innovation teams, or even just when they work with the CTO office or CSO office, they will work with Plug and Play on just a specific area and then have more resources dedicated to actual parts that affect the business.
Right. So you don't actually provide the innovation services. Like, say, I'm at a corporate and I have an innovation group and I have a certain amount of people who are working for that group, and all of a sudden I'm faced with spending cuts, and I got to go, you know what? I want to continue these projects, but I don't have anybody in house to do this anymore. Do I come to you guys or do I do something else?
So we unfortunately don't take on these projects and implement them on the corporate side of things. That would be fun though. That would be really fun, right? For us, it's more of if you can come to us with a problem area or a technology that you're looking into, then we help find more innovative solutions to fit that bill. Right?
So it has to be a little more defined than that, right? So if I'm doing a specific kind of trial with a specific kind of thing, then I could come to you and say, hey, this is what we're planning, this is what we're thinking about doing, and then you'd find somebody who'd be able to help us do that.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's not as broad. It's got to be more like POC oriented or focused specifically on alignment or something like that. Oh, so yeah. Okay. So if I wanted to build an app which focused on like a specific section of my user base, so let's say, I don't know, let's say I'm a bank, right? And I need to build an app just for Gen Z. Would I be able to go to you guys and say, here's my specifications, help us find somebody who can help us build this?
Yeah, we could do it on a project basis. I wouldn't say it would be that easy. We would find startup companies that are already working on solutions similar to that, and that would partner, for example, with said bank.
Right. And then with that startup, so if you found a startup that was interested in doing that, is that then that was one of their exit strategies to be bought by the corporate? Or, I mean, where does that go from there? Like if they were to assist?
So I think the traditional relationship that we see from the corporate to startup introduction is usually they will engage in a POC or a pilot project, let's say 3 months, 6 months. And then during that time, it's almost like a period of time where you can show value, right? Like proof of value, if you will. And then from there, the larger corporation will decide whether if they want to continue, right? Is that startup able to really provide that solution we're looking for? And then from there, I would say if the relationship continues, if the POC is on a much bigger scale, there's a lot bigger, more of a relationship. Sometimes the corporations will have money invested into the startup just to have more visibility into the financials, right? If you're on the board and you're working with the startup, the last thing you want is to find out, oh, hey, they don't have any more money, right?
Yeah.
And that just comes out of nowhere. And then usually most corporates, when they work with us, they wait until startups have a much more solid revenue stream before they hop into the M&A phase.
Right.
Larger corporations tend to wait a lot more. They would rather buy a company for 300 million with solid revenue than 15 million, right? Much earlier.
Yeah. So that's interesting you should say that, because I think that's the thing that's really hobbling a lot of innovation within these organizations is that on the one hand, yes, they do want to have an internal group that innovates, but on the other hand, they're risk averse to throw money in to let whatever it is get far enough along and get far enough traction for it to say, yes, this was a success. So are you seeing that more? I mean, this is what I'm seeing is that there's more of a let's sit back and wait, let's let these startups battle it out for market share, and then once we see that there's a market there and they're making money, we swoop in and buy them. Is that what you're saying too?
It's a lot more reactive, right? A lot more reactive than we've hoped. And I think the issue is larger companies, they tend to be a little bit more afraid to fail. And I think the best way to counteract that is just if you fail, just fail fast and at least learn from your mistakes. So that way you're at least in a better position than your competitor who's still sitting on the sidelines watching everything happening.
Yeah. Or fail fast and fail cheap, right?
Exactly. Cheap is the main thing, I think.
cheap is absolutely the main thing. It's like I was the other day. It's like we were doing a proposal for one of my clients, and it was 5-10 years out product. And it was like, well, where's the business model? Where's the financial model? It's like, well, we don't even know if this thing's going to sell or who the market is yet. But yeah, we still have to provide sort of like, wild ass guesses on what it's going to be like, even though we have no idea how big the market's going to be. But we have an idea, and we have an idea for the cost, but it's just, it's kind of like the same thing startups are in too, right? If you've got these brand new, totally innovative products that no one's ever heard of and no one even understands, how can you possibly, speculate on how big the market's going to be? Anyway,
I would say the market should exist, right? But unless you're so far ahead on your innovation that it's just completely, that entire area just does not exist yet, right? Like cloud kitchens.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or but think about, let's go back and look at some of the innovations that are other. So something like Facebook is obviously, a retread of MySpace, but better. But what Twitter's like, what the hell is that, right? Twitter is not like anything else that is out there. That was out there back in 2009 or 2008 when they launched. There was nothing else out there like Twitter. And it was even a Skunkworks project from Odeo, right? So, nobody thought it was going to do anything. Nobody thought it was going to make any money. And then all of a sudden, boom, here it is. And now nobody can imagine life without Twitter. How could they have possibly put that business together and pitched it? I can't see somebody taking Twitter and pitching it today and somebody going, yes, that's great, go for it.
Yeah. Can you imagine pitching Twitter back then? It was just like, oh yeah, we're going to create an app and a website, which is pretty much just the status aspect of Facebook, and just remove everything else. Genius.
Yeah. But then look at what happened to it, right? So there's in plenty of cases. And if you think about it, it's the same with the iPhone, right? The iPhone was a massive hit, but I heard that there was very little customer input into the initial design. It was just a whole secret team working somewhere and putting this whole thing together. And then when they put it out there, everybody thought it was amazing. So
yeah, I think Steve Jobs has a good way of telling. He's the one that tells the customers what they want. Right? He had a pretty good way of doing that. He's like, nope, you don't want this. We're doing it this way, and everyone's like, yes, we love it. We're all going to buy this new iPhone.
So you got a lot of visionaries like that amongst your cohorts, right? All of your peeps there?
Ooh, ideally, we want everyone to feel like this is their product is the future, right? That should be the mentality of every single founder. If you don't believe in your own product, then I don't think startup is the right way to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So do you have a lot of competitors in your midst? Like, do you bring in like company A and then company B, and they're both kind of doing the same thing, and you still manage to work with them? Yeah.
So there have been quite a few instances, as you can imagine. If there's one startup company, for example, let's just say autonomous driving, if there's one startup doing autonomous software, there's already 5 or 6 doing the exact same thing. And so we will help as many startup companies as we can connect to the right corporations. But ultimately, the investments that we make are based off the traction that we see they gain with the corporates. And so, for example, if we see Mercedes, Ford, Renault all working with one company, it's a no-brainer for us to approach them and say, hey, can we put in a couple bucks?
Right. So it's really, if the corporates that you're working with give it the stamp of approval, then that's basically where you're probably going to go anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
So when are we going to see virtual plug and play?
So we do have a virtual summit happening in September. I can actually pull up these dates.
Cool.
If I can. And I can share this link with you shortly afterwards. And so that way you can just share with your listeners. It's going to be on June 14th, 15th, and 16th.
Oh, June? That's like in a couple of weeks.
Right around the corner. Yeah, exactly. It's Summer Summit. We do our big events every season. And now our biggest event, which is usually summer, is entirely virtual. With little breakout sessions for the startup companies after the pitch, so you can almost walk up to their virtual booth and ask questions.
Wow. Very cool. Very cool. Well, I'm going to have to put this up this weekend then, because I want to make sure I get in time for people to show up to this thing. Is this thing free, or do people have
It
to
is
pay?
free.
Okay.
Traditionally, it was not free, but now that everything's virtual, there's no space limitations, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
open to everyone to join.
Nice. Nice. I'll definitely put the links in to the bottom. So what are you guys looking for? I mean, are you looking for more startups? Are you looking for more corporate partners? Or, I mean, what are you looking for? What can help you?
So we're always looking for more startup companies. The way we see it is the more startup companies are on the platform, it will attract a lot more corporations to join and work with this ecosystem. And then if more corporations on the platform, then the startups see that and say, hey, we should be part of this platform as well. And so it's a
Yeah.
very win-win situation. And then Plug and Play is just sitting right in the middle,
Yeah.
taking
It's
in
like
all
network
of this
effects.
information.
It's like network effects. The more corporates you have, the more startups you have. Are you planning on dominating this space? So
I
there's
would hope
nobody else
so.
in
I
it?
would hope so. Well, we're definitely welcome to having competition.
Yeah.
I think life would be very boring if there was no one to look over your shoulder. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And if you think about it, I mean, it helps you move faster too, right? If you always,
Exactly.
if somebody chasing you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. So you're going to send me those links. I'll post them in the video below, and I'll post them in the podcast link. So hopefully, a bunch of people will see it and want to attend the summit. And it's a summit, right? That's what it's called. It was like
It's a
your summer.
summit. You can call it an expo, demo day, summit. I think
Yeah.
the proper term at Plug and Play is summit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm definitely going to be there. So you'll send me that stuff, and we're all good to go. So, is there
Awesome.
anything else you want to end up with, or we're good?
No, I just want to say thank you for having me.
Ooh, thanks for
If
coming
you guys
on.
have any questions, feel free to reach out to Chris, and then we'll connect directly to me.
Absolutely. Sounds great. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a good one.